Welcome to this first in the MAD webinar series. You might have seen when you looked at Eventbrite that the School Resource Management Network is running a series of webinars called Making a Difference under our MAD banner. Let's just introduce ourselves so you know who is talking to you today. Fee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Matthew. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Fee Stagg. I run a consultancy called SBW Governance that stands for Success Begins with Governance, because it absolutely does. I'm a governance professional, governance consultant, and experienced trustee, chair, and governor. And this is my 21st week in governance in one way or another. I know I don't look old enough, but there you go. So that's me. And thank you to those people that know me for joining in today.
Did you say 21st week, Fee? 21st year?
Yeah.
Subtle difference. My name is Matthew Clements Wheeler. I have spent every year of my adult life over the age of 18, bar one, involved in not-for-profit governance in one form or another. Like Fee, I'm involved in supporting governance. I am involved in various governing bodies, member of a couple of trusts, a trustee at another, and have previously chaired a variety as well. So that's us. Let's do some explanation. So why are you seeing this logo when Fee and I both run our own companies? Fee and I are both members of the School Resource Management Network. That's a network of independent consultants supporting governance, school business ops, doing things like integrated curriculum and financial planning, providing project partners and accountability buddy services. We do a whole range of things, including IT support, project management, procurement. Across our network, we've got national coverage. We provide mutual support, and you get better capacity than if you were dealing with a solopreneur alone. There we are. That's the end of the sales pitch just for what we're doing. It is okay to interrupt. So please mute if you're not alone or you're somewhere noisy. But if you want to chip in, then do just say, hey, and jump in. It's fine to add materials or contribute during the chat. There is wisdom in the system, and collectively adding it helps. As we say, the session is being recorded, and we do use some AI summary tools to help us produce materials out the back of these sessions. Preferences for cameras on, but off is fine too. Take a comfort break if you need to. That includes putting the kettle on or going to the loo. And the most important rule on any professional dialogue like this is please be nice to each other, not just to us. You might disagree with a question that's asked or an answer that's given. Let's do it in a nice way and demonstrate the principles that we would want of good governance. We will be looking at why speaking up matters, and with the risks of staying silent. We'll be looking to see if we can tell the difference between a professional concern or just a difference of approach. We'll give you some tools and some hints on how to ask the difficult questions and hopefully avoid alienating colleagues. And we've got some scenarios towards the back end of our hour together that we can throw together that might help us get into some of the weeds on that. So, do we have, give us a wave, say hi if we've got any governance professionals here. Hello, folks. Excellent. Do we have any trustees or governors or members? Yep, excellent. Hello. I'm going to own up to being one of those as well, as is Fee. So that's great. And other people who haven't fallen into one of those two categories, do you want to say what's brought you here?
So I'm just here to get some different perspectives on how things should work, rather than just my own quite narrow view at the moment.
Great. Excellent. And then again, if others have questions or particular things they want answered, we will have a chance to pick those up. So without further ado, let's jump in. Fee, do you want to take over at this point? Because I've just gabbled for the last few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. We all are familiar, aren't we, with the Nolan principles? And one of the Nolan principles is around, being transparent and acting with integrity. And so in the conversations that Matthew and I have been having over the last couple of months, it's been becoming apparent that, there was a bit of a need and a gap in the market for a session in a safe space to talk about why speaking up is important, because pupils only get one chance at their education. You are a trustee or a governance professional, and it's a very privileged position to be in. We've got to have active engagement in our meetings, and we could have spend quite a long time talking about the difference between active and passive governance, and we've got a slide on that in a moment. But at the end of the day, your voice, your concern, raising that concern is really, really important, that you are able to do that in a safe space, because at the end of the day, not only do children only get one chance at education, but also we are a collective. Governing boards are collective, and we have to be much more active and much more au fait in being brave, really. So that's really why speaking up is important. We've obviously got the whistleblowing policies and all those kind of things, but at the end of the day, creating a safe space and being able to share our concerns, niggles, worries, spidey moments is absolutely essential. So that's why speaking up is important.
You've written extensively, and those of you who haven't seen Fee's great big governance glossary, which she updates every year, is a great big A to Z of governing terms, plus hints, tips, spreadsheets, checklists that can be used to improve governance practice in your setting. So go and have a look at Fee's great big governance glossary after today's session. But we've taken this table, haven't we, Fee, from there to illustrate the difference between passive governance and active governance. Do you want to talk about what not speaking up leads to as a risk, and why we need to speak out?
Absolutely. There's a spectrum between active governance and passive governance, and we will be exhibiting each one of these characteristics during any average governing board meeting, if there is such a thing as an average governing board meeting. So I was thinking really around how can we codify what really active governance looks like in terms of those tasks that we have to do. We have to question and challenge, and we're going to talk about the 3 C's later on: question, challenge, and clarification. And we've got to be asking evidence-based questions. And so let's just take that one as the first one. So you sitting in a meeting, you've got 25 attachments for this 2-hour meeting. You've got an agenda, your minutes, reports, policies, terms of reference, various bits and bobs that are coming in, and you've read it all, pages and pages and pages of it. Something's still not sitting quite right. So you've got to try and unpick all that and have the confidence to do that, because we've absolutely got to be asking probing evidence-based questions. The second part of that evidence is the evidence that you gather individually through your link governor roles, through the reading that you do, through attending sessions like this that spark thoughts in your head. That's what active governance looks like, and you can absolutely see that in a good set of minutes. We absolutely need to run a session, Matthew, on what does a good set of minutes look like. Flip side of that is passive governance, and that's where we're just sitting there accepting the information that's presented to us. And the comments that I hear when I'm doing external reviews of governance and when I'm talking to governors is around, well, we don't really like to challenge the head teacher because they're the head teacher and they know what they're doing, and if they're telling us that's the way it should be, then we really don't like to challenge that. And so it's just an absorbing of information. So if you're sitting in front of an Ofsted inspector and he or she's challenging you about something, and tell me more about why is that happening, and you go, well, I read it in the head teacher's report, that is not going to go down too well, because you're just being passive receivers of information. And the same goes with strategic oversight. If we've got governing boards that are just going from meeting to meeting in silos where there's no connections between the two, nothing happening in between the two, then we're not delivering that long-term vision and goal. And I think is that one of the things that we must speak up about. And if the one takeaway from me to you for tonight is make sure that your meetings are talking to that strategy. There's so many times that I see, into the spring term, we still haven't approved a strategy. It is bouncing from meeting to meeting to meeting. And so in terms of, calling things out and being brave and asking questions about, how does this deliver the strategy? That's one thing that we absolutely have to speak up about, because as we all know, that's the first core function of governance, irrespective of the second. And so that simple table there is just unpicking some of those thoughts. I mean, each one of those, as I say, we could spend an hour going through each one of those boxes individually. So that's what that is, and we offer that to you as a talking point, really.
And again, it's that stimulus to speak up, because you are looking to self-assess, and those of us that have done or are working as governance professionals and advising governing bodies, we still have a role because we are the guardians of probity and regularity. That means tapping the chair on the elbow and just passing notes and giving guidance across to actually say this needs to be happening. As a clerk, keep an eye. As a board member, keep an eye on the clock. Keep an eye on your watch in meetings. Make sure there's enough time on the agenda. If you don't speak up early on, then there won't be time. The need to get involved actively in managing the business of the meeting is as important as actually critiquing the paperwork and the things that are in front of you. I want to, rather than positioning Fee and myself as experts, I want to give you an example here of when I didn't speak up and I shouldn't have done. How many of you are familiar with the single status pay debate in Birmingham and the problems and the bankruptcy that Birmingham City Council has got itself into? Yeah, so for about 15 years now, Birmingham has been wrestling with the issue of single status in its staff, because it has been paying the bin operatives more than it has been paying its TAs and lunchtime supervisors. Now, about 6 years ago, I represented the schools on a negotiation. I sat on the employer's side of the table with the council's corporate HR and the unions. And they were talking about how they would reconfigure the contract and how it would resolve in a new workforce and streamline approaches. And something in the body language of the corporate HR team told me there was something that wasn't on the table. Just the way they looked at each other, and one senior member of staff just reached out and just tapped the back of the hand of one of her slightly more junior colleagues who was about to say something on the topic of contracts and bin men and settlements. And I bitterly regret not making enough of a fuss about that in the meeting or afterwards when feeding back to the other secondary schools in the city, because I potentially had an opportunity to say, is there a deal that's not on the table and hasn't been discussed in this meeting? And because I felt like a slightly junior person around the table, I didn't go with my gut. And if I had only spoken up in that meeting, who knows what could have been avoided as a problem. So, we're not the experts, and we do have experience of having made mistakes. You never know when something is going to become an issue. This childhood poem, you're probably familiar with it. The story of the nail resulting in the loss of the shoe, the horse, the rider, the message, and the battle was lost. The battle, the kingdom disappears, and all for the want of the horseshoe nail. That is probably what has drawn you folks to this webinar this evening, that you may have experienced in the past, an issue which you think needs raising. It might not be the nail, it might already be the message that needs delivering. It might be a sick horse that needs shooting or replacing. But it's working out when to intervene, because how to intervene, when I promise we'll come on to that. We've got some hints, tips and slides, and you will get the slides with those hints and tips in from this webinar. But is everything something which should be raised? I've given you a personal example of a look, a gesture that absolutely was a nail that led to the loss of the kingdom. But is everything of equal weight and value? And this is something that you have to weigh before asking those questions, intervening and speaking up. So there's quite a useful rule of thumb. My wife used to say to me, will it matter in 2 weeks? Chill out, Matthew. You're getting all het up over something. You've come home from work and you're blethering on. Will it actually matter in 2 weeks? And between us, Fee and I began to build that out into a time frame. So if for instance, there was the little red squiggle that you see in PowerPoint. If I'd spelt minutes incorrectly, I hope there's no spelling error on that slide. But if there was a little red squiggle and I was preparing this slide, I would be really annoyed by it, and I would have to correct it. I'd have to speak out. I'd have to speak up. I'd have to go and correct the typo. But if you are watching me work, you would know that hopefully I will proofread the presentation before uploading it and sending it out. And you don't need to speak up and say, Matthew, you've got a red squiggle in the first line of the table. You can leave it. But if you know that we're presenting in 2 hours and I've finished proofing and I've done this now, that's the point at which you go, Matthew, there's a red squiggle in the top line of the table. It's time to speak out. And you can follow that through. So if we go down towards the bottom of that table, we begin to see 2 weeks. We begin to think about things that need to be escalated. Who's responsible by that point? We go over to that right-hand column. Will it matter in 2 weeks? Yes, okay, let's escalate it to senior leadership. It might need a short-term intervention. It might need a policy review. Will it matter in 2 weeks that this member of staff has been off sick? Yes, if it's a GCSE or an A-level cohort. Yes, it will matter if they're the person in charge of SAT prep. When we're moving towards those periods in the year, actually that needs to be escalated. There is, of course, an exception, which is a health and safety or safeguarding issue that we deal with now. We don't wait for it to be 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 hours. We deal with those issues immediately. But this is your kind of Bible, which begins to think, do I mention this horse, this nail, this horseshoe, this horse that's flagging or not? We extend it out the other side, don't we feel? Now we're beginning to think at the top of this second slide, this is board level monitoring or discussion. 2 terms. Because if something isn't fixed in 2 minutes, it's not a board issue. If it's not fixed in 2 hours or even 2 weeks, it's probably not a board issue, unless it's something related to compliance or safety. Other than that, you're beginning to think 2 terms. Now that timescale is quite useful for thinking when to speak up as well, because it's probably when you should revisit it. So I've seen something, and actually this is a sort of 2-term issue. So what I'm going to do is make a mental note and keep an eye on this for 2 terms. And if in 2 terms it's not been solved, I'm going to be intervening. If it's going to take a long time to solve it, I might not wait to intervene for the whole 2 terms. I might intervene at next term's governing body meeting, so that by the time we get to the end of the 2nd term from me first noticing it, it's been dealt with. This actually even brings up the concept of sustainability. If you take it towards the end of this table, if we don't speak up in our board meetings, if we don't take action, the planet itself ultimately will and will wipe us out as a species. Does anybody have any questions around that as a mindset or a mentality of when to speak up and what sorts of issues might crop up then?
We deliberately added the 2 centuries one because of the length of time of some of the leases on land in terms of diocesan transfers to more academy trusts. So that's why that one's there.
Interesting questions there. This kind of model as to when to speak up gives you an approach to this. So you can sort of categorize governance activities and whether you should speak up as kitchen, workshop, greenhouse. And I'll take you through this slightly dodgy analogy that I've used previously. Things that happen in the kitchen happen now. Bang, bang, bang. You're thinking Gordon Ramsay. You're thinking, yes, chef. You're thinking, you've got 20 minutes to make me a paella from these ingredients. Do it now. You've got lots of safety issues. You've got sharp objects. You've got burning hobs. You've got hot ovens. You've got gas things that could explode. So the analogy of the kitchen are things that need sorting now. So if something that's burning, somebody get that out before the casserole burns. You are intervening immediately because the time frames are short. When you get into the workshop, what are the things you bring into a workshop in governance? The workshop is where you take the wheels off things and you take things apart. So what you do under those circumstances, you might bring an entire key stage curriculum plan in to be reworked, to be considered. You might bring your approach to sustainability or safeguarding. We're going to rethink our training and development program for middle leaders. You actually have to stop doing some things, you evaluate it, you walk around it, you kick the tires, you put some bits back on, you buy some new bits, you put it back together. People don't shout across the workshop, "Oi, that needs fixing now." It goes on a list of things to be done. Right, we'll plan to do that in a month's time. Greenhouse, let's move there. Our time frame for intervening in the greenhouse is very different. There's absolutely no point opening the door of the greenhouse and going, "Has the seedlings grown yet?" I mean, my kids did when they were little, and you might have done it as a child, poking at the plant to go, "Have the seeds grown? Have the seeds grown?" In fact, constantly opening the greenhouse to check on progress actually can kill the very plants that you are trying to nurture. And there's a message there for, do you start intervening? Do you start asking questions? Can I see more detail on that? Can you tell me about X, Y, and Z? There is a risk that when you intervene, you actually distract leadership teams from the business of actually growing the plants, growing the trust, doing the business, and educating the kids. So you have to think, have we got the right people in the right place doing the right things? And is this the right time for me to be asking the question? So that again is another thing to bear in mind before deciding when to intervene and ask the question. So assuming we've asked ourselves the inner question, will this matter in 2 weeks, 2 terms, 2 months, 2 decades? And we've decided yes, we want to intervene, and we've got reason for doing so. We think that this is the right forum for doing it because this is I'm not a trustee sitting in on an executive team meeting and telling them how to do, not micromanaging spelling mistakes on the website. Oh, by the way, my personal peccadillo, things to speak up about. If you are speaking up about typos in policies, don't. That is not a trustee's job. It's not the clerk's job either. Your job is to go, 6 of the policies that came to this meeting were unfinished or had typos. What you speak up on is not, there's a typo on page 37. What you speak up on is say, is there a capacity issue that's leading to poor quality documentation coming to the board? Are there issues which are causing us to rush these issues? Have we as a board set an unrealistic time frame for our executive to get documents to us? Do we have other conflicting problems which our executive need to focus on, and somebody else needs to be employed to double check the typos? So it's about working on where you need to be managing stuff. Fee, that's enough of me. Let's jump back to you. Do you want to give us some thoughts? We might alternate these.
Thank you. We've got some scenarios, so I'll quickly whiz through these because we know we're going to share the slides with you. Absolutely, the first one's really important, and I know it's really difficult. There's a comment in the chat about somebody struggling with not being able to speak in meetings. Generally speaking, if we're clear about the reason that we're raising a question, we're clear about the rationale for undertaking the challenge, and it's rooted in reality, it's rooted in evidence, and it's not a personality matter. That's absolutely the way it should be. And we can't like everybody around the board table, if you like. But we've got to be focused on the purpose, and so often purpose is getting lost. We can share some. I can share some thoughts around that later on after the session, if you like. So, using curiosity before challenge. Challenge isn't a negative word, but so often it's seen as something negative. And people that know me know that one of my mantras is curious questions matter, because they absolutely do 100% of the time. So if we can just be more curious, and then with that obviously comes a little bit of being brave, not just taking the first answer that comes, pushing back, why are you doing that? Give me a bit more information. I'm not happy with that because of X, Y, and Z. Then that's going to lead intuitively into challenge. Be prepared. If you have got something that you want to challenge about, Do some preparation first. Obviously, you know, it's okay to react immediately about something. That doesn't tend to go down as well if you haven't got the reasons why ready written down on a piece of paper. Matthew's just spoken about flipping that question around, issue around, you know, why are policies late, full of spelling errors, not completed on time, to one of capacity. And that is a constraint that we have. So we have to be reasonable. You know, raising an issue that is really, really operational is not necessarily the most effective use of governance time. And I've just put a little comment in the chat about, you know, better use of action logs and better use of agendas. We can just give some thought to how we're doing those and what we're using them for. Then I think a lot of the challenges that come up will be mitigated. Try not to be judgmental. It's really difficult. Staying calm, also not easy, particularly if you've got an issue that's really grinding your gears, that's really, really concerning you. Trying to be neutral and calm, unbiased and fact-based and evidence-based is absolutely the right thing to do. It isn't easy. Having those shared values front and centre. So often, you know, when decisions and conversations are difficult, they're outside of the values, and because we don't talk about those school or academy values as much as we could. And they're also very useful on the other side of that, is that if something is happening and it absolutely goes against everything that we believe in, everything that's written down in all our documentation, what's written large on the website in terms of our values, then it is absolutely something that we need to shout. Your guiding principles come back to Nolan every single time, and the sibling values of ethical leadership and wisdom and judgment and optimism, etc. And then finally, thank, and then think. You know, thank you is a very important thing to say. Don't say it so many times in a meeting it becomes meaningless, but thank first and then think is the last one there, really. So making a difference, don't make enemies.
Follow the driving adage of mirror, signal, manoeuvre. Why? You have a look around you before you pull out. You signal your intention to do so, and then you execute, having signalled your intention. So that mirror, signal, manoeuvre is about, and this begins to speak to Mel's question in the chat about where there's a tacit executive instruction to say silent. You begin to signal your intention to speak on an issue. Now, that might be to say, I need to raise something under AOB. It may be, if you're a governance professional, to be saying, as part of the next meeting, I want to work with the chair to put aspects of X or Y on the agenda to keep you guys safe. So you are beginning to signal. And then you actually do it, because you have to begin to follow through, using some of these hints and tips here. But the mirror bit is to look around you. What else is on the agenda? If you've got an issue that you want to raise, don't surprise the chair by shoehorning it into the meeting at the last moment when it's getting tired and people are, you know, getting frustrated, because that's not going to help raise a significant or sensitive issue. Some of the people we've talked to over the years have said, Matthew, what do I do? I'm on a board and I've got some experience of this. Either I am a teacher, or I'm a school business professional, or I am a surveyor, you know, or an architect, and I've seen that something is going awry. Should I say something? And the answer is yes. You should say something. You are there to add value. What you are supposed to be doing as a governance professional, as a governor, as a trustee, as a member, is contributing to the meetings that you're in. That's why you are expected to come to them. That's why there's a quorum, because we are expected to have enough people here using their noggins and applying their grey material to actually move from passive acceptance through to active governance and engagement with the issues. So if you've got a professional concern, what do you do? So let's think about it. So a professional concern is where your skills, training, or experience leads you to believe that there is a significant issue here. Whereas a different approach is just that. It's a difference of opinion. Somebody else might do something in a different way, use a different methodology, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is wrong. If we use marking, good old review of marking, when people put an appeal in for GCSEs and A-levels, some of you on the call will be familiar with the concept that when something goes for a review of marking, it goes for a remark, what actually happens is the exam board takes a look at it and goes, has the mark scheme reasonably been applied to that answer? Not, is it definitively correct? But if somebody who was a competent marker were to mark that answer and they've given it a mark, can I see why they've given it? Even if I wouldn't necessarily give exactly that mark myself, I might move it by 1 or 2 marks. We've already got that concept in the education system, so we need to bring that concept to governance. If we recognise that difference is not necessarily a deficiency, just because somebody does it a different way, they are just different. Happy days. We've not all got groupthink and everybody is a carbon copy of each other. So ask yourself, is it a difference in style or a genuine risk to oversight, compliance or outcomes? Apply your professional experience selectively. You can't be jumping up and down every issue that comes up. So, if it's a governance risk, if there's a decision-making gap, if there's a failure of assurance, that's when your professional radar goes up and you get involved. If it's just operational preference or a different, or not even best practice, then that's when you wind your neck in because it's not proportional to intervene in a 2-hour meeting. There isn't enough time. Develop that itch versus issue feeling. So an itch goes back to the will it matter in 2 weeks question. Is this something that I would need to raise now? Or am I parking it and coming back to it, but I'm not forgetting about it because it's a niggle? Or is it really an issue which needs dealing with? Because if we move on beyond this meeting, we will have passed a point of no return. We will have passed a point where we've missed a critical moment where an intervention could and therefore should have happened. Ask yourself, what's my intent? Am I here to make myself look good? And do I want to share my knowledge and say, actually, I've had a crap day at work, but I can provide value here and I can say I know something about this? If that's the reason why you're intervening, wind your neck in. However, if your intent is genuinely to help the organisation, genuinely to address a risk, genuinely to avoid moving beyond a moment where it's a point of no return, speak up, get involved. Use Fee's questioning model. Those questions which are curious, which clarify, which challenge, but use them to explore, not to expose. You're not looking for a ta-da moment where you are looking to highlight somebody's performance, lack of knowledge, discrepancy in judgments or tensions between members of the board, the committees, or even the senior team. You are asking your questions curiously, gently, looking to explore. Check your vantage point. What do I mean by that? External expertise can really add enormous value. If you're a lawyer, if you're an architect, if you are a fully qualified governance professional helping a lay board to make decisions, ask yourself, what does my professional lens actually help illuminate? And what might it distort? Because unless you are supremely confident and you shut up after you asked your question, there is a tendency to ask subsequent questions and to add more value and to illustrate by anecdotes. And you can make it impossible for a chair to manage the conversation. You can involve the executive, the leadership team of the school, or the trust in conversations around your side issues that don't need to be there. So what is the point of the professional view that you are bringing, and does it help or hinder in the way that you are bringing it? And that collegiate image there, which is about creating a board that welcomes curiosity. Board meetings should be safe spaces. By all means, people should go, that was tough. I was given a good going, not a good going over. I was put through my paces. You should feel like you've run a good race and done your best at the end of the meeting as a participant in it. Not that you've been collectively taken outside and beaten up with a baseball bat. So people can be asked to do something again. They can be asked to elucidate. They can be asked questions. They can be asked to consider something. They can be asked to be honest about their own fragility or lack of knowledge, but in a way that is safe. To ask people, what are the assumptions that you are making, that you are working on? And again, those professional concerns, you've got to remember that you don't work full-time in the organisation that you are questioning. So even if you have very relevant knowledge, it's not your day job, and you don't know what else everyone was dealing with before they put the paper together for the meeting. You don't know exactly what else has happened. And if you do, you are too in the operational weeds, and you need to rethink your approach to governance culture anyway. So, yeah, it's about how do you spot signs that this balance is off? I think too much scepticism, where meetings feel slow or defensive. Too many papers, where the executive team are having to overthink things in advance because they're not trusted by people who want to raise difficult issues. The converse is too little challenge. Meetings feel scripted. We have one voice, and that's the lead executive presenting. It could be the head teacher, the CEO, the CFO, who's giving that information. Meetings feel purely ceremonial. So people aren't asking the questions. They're not asking what will, as a result of this decision that we're taking today, how will things look like in 2 terms, 2 years, 2 decades? Think back to the bigger picture and ask, are we missing a moment here where we should have intervened? Does that strike a bit of a chord with people? Whilst I've been talking, I haven't had a chance to look in the chat. Fee, do you want to come back? Because I know you've been watching the chat.
I have. I've just been having a bit of a discussion about online meetings and how difficult it sometimes is to raise issues during an online meeting, which is harder than when you're face to face, because you're not reading people's body languages in the same way, and people's cameras fail and mics fail and all that kind of thing. So it comes down to intentional chairing and making sure that if you are the chair, you're making sure and inviting everybody to speak, because sometimes the itchy issues are not just one person's itchy issue, it's actually the whole board. So it just takes one person to be brave. And if you know that you've got somebody with an issue, because you're watching that body language, getting agitated in the chair, or they're banging the table, or they're wiggling about or something, you can invite them to speak. And I think that's positive, good sharing. And the other thing is to be really clear, I think, about the agenda and what your purpose of each particular agenda item is, and having clear paperwork to support it. And if we get those foundation stones in place, quite a lot of the time the issues that concern us are resolved. But at the moment, there's just so much to read. We find issues are raised that as problems. Tell me more about it. And there's an agitation around it, but it's clearly written in the paperwork that people haven't had a chance to read. So there's a piece of work to be done around streamlining and all of that as well, I think. And that's the example that I've seen, where trustees get very agitated about something, but it's been in the paperwork and they just haven't read it. So I don't really think I can add anything more to that. We've got a couple of scenarios we want to talk through, don't we?
Yeah, let's just put some things up in front of you here. So glossy report versus the numbers. We've seen these scenarios where we've got a very positive report that comes in, but the data in the appendices doesn't match. What do we do in those scenarios? This is throwing the question open to people before Fee and I come in with the
open forum, no right or wrong answer.
No right or wrong answers.
Obviously, you ask if the head can elucidate what the difficulty is with the. I'm struggling to understand what this attendance data is, because it doesn't seem to be saying that we've got good attendance. Where am I going wrong? And can you help me put this right? Mostly, I think opening the board to everybody that there may be some concerns there, and seeing what kind of answer we get.
Sometimes it could just be down to a simple mistake, and that's what I see. Somebody's put the wrong number in. I see that quite regularly, and that comes back to having. It's our responsibility as trustees to make sure that the reports that are presented to us make sense to us, that they're legible, accessible, and easy to understand. And if we're burying data, if we're obfuscating information through, dense prose, then there's something needs to be called out on that.
I think I would probably just blurt out, hold on, that doesn't agree with page 53 of your report. But what I should say is, I'm struggling to get this because it looks as though it's slightly different. What am I not understanding? That's what I should be saying, but my brain doesn't always work like that.
I think it's about identifying which issue you're trying to solve. There's nothing wrong with calling a spade and a nail a nail. If the data doesn't agree and it doesn't match, and this is perhaps a one-off, then, and there is a good relationship and a good board culture, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just being blunt and blurting out. If you've been watching this and what you've seen is a succession of discrepancies, then we're dealing with a different issue. Then we're dealing with someone who's putting a positive presentation on something. We know it's not a typo, an error, because it's consistent across a range of things. So it's about working out what issue it is you want to speak up on, so that when you use that precious board time in the meeting, you are actually asking the question about the real underlying issues. So, you may well be familiar with the 5 whys tool. Just ask yourself 5 levels of why. So the data doesn't match. Why might that be? And we get an answer. Why might that be? Okay, then, so why might that be? And we begin possibly to get towards a very different hypothesis than the blurting out of the data on page 57 don't match. We begin to ask ourselves all sorts of strategic questions that join the dots together, that say, what is this about the culture, about the timing, about the capacity? We've got all sorts of really good governance questions going on now, and our intervention is very much more appropriate when we ask it. Could just be a misunderstanding, of course. I mean, one of the ones that I see is RAG rating. Blooming well, love, when I do external reviews of governance, I ask people who chose the upper and lower boundaries for amber. Because when you look at a dashboard and it's all green, that's lovely, but who chose what constitutes green? It's just one of those naughty questions that you get to ask when you're doing a review. Budget black holes. Here's one. Take us through this one, Fee.
Okay, now let's hope that none of this is in your boards, but you get presented the finance data, you suddenly and it's all been going smoothly, management accounts are lovely, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've just found that we've got this sum of money that we hadn't accounted for, and it's 500,000, 250,000, 100,000, but don't worry about it, because we're going to solve it here, and we've got some money coming in there, and we've got some in reserves, and you're just not feeling that this is something's going on, at what point do you think that you should say something? This is a real scenario. Perhaps not that scale. Okay, so one of the supporting pieces of information that would be quite useful to have a look at is just have a read of some of the recent notice to improves that have been issued by the DfE that comes back down to governance and finance, about things that have gone wrong, and it's a salutary lesson to us all, I think. It's all right for you to, as trustees and governors, to ask for an external financial audit. I think more boards and trustees should be asking for that. And there's a lot of support out there in the sector that can help you do that. So you should be. Nothing should come as a surprise to you in terms of budgets. There should be, the monthly management accounts. Even in maintained schools, you should be receiving information at least 6 times a year. Keep your questions to the strategic. Obviously, if there's £50 difference, then don't worry about it, because that can be easily absorbed. But if you've got 6 figures after it, then yeah, do say something, and early. It's better to look silly because you've misunderstood something than to not say something at all.
The question I would be asking at this point is looking at board capacity, because if we are accepting the CFO's insistence that it's all under control, I would be thinking to myself, okay, what's our meeting frequency? When will I next see the evidence that this is under control? If at the point I see that it's not under control, how much time will we as a board have voluntarily abdicated, given up, by not asking for more information now, or not looking to change our pattern of meetings or the nature of financial reporting within the organisation? Because if we are meeting every 2 months, then when we get to 2 months' time, we have given up the 2 months that we could have been having more reports. If we are meeting termly, then we are leaving a heck of a long time before we have tangible evidence that everything is under control. So it's about that capacity. If you it's the Mr. Micawber principle. If you balance by a penny, that's happy. If you don't balance by a penny, that's penury and misery. So depending on the reserves that you've got, we've gone for a big figure here because reputationally that damage is significant. That's jobs, that's programs, that's capacity in one or more school, if it's a trust or federation or whatever. So yeah, definitely something to be intervening early on at the point where it is mentioned to you as a board. And you shouldn't get beyond that without having the conversation. How confident are we as a board that we have enough time to respond to this?
Keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
Keep coming back to it. Don't let it go.
So staff governor quietly hints that safeguarding systems aren't as robust as they should be. One of those lovely water cooler moment corridor conversations, but offers no specifics. Chair's not put it on the agenda until there's evidence. What do you do?
I think you ask for somebody to investigate whether you've got somebody on the governing body who's a safeguarding link, or you need immediate feedback to test this out.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would agree. The principles of being told things about safeguarding by staff equally apply to the principles of being told things by children. Is that you don't promise to keep confidences. This is a safeguard. There's a potential safeguarding issue. The other thing that I would say to the staff governor in this scenario, whether it's at a local academy board or in a maintained school setting, it is the staff member's job to follow up if they have concerns. And once they have told somebody that they think something is awry but haven't actioned it, the difficult conversation to have with them there is to gently say, I need to advise you to protect yourself by having a conversation with your union and escalating this through the whistleblowing policy if you don't have any joy through the normal line management structure. So A, you're not keeping the confidence. B, you are directing the member of staff appropriately, so you've not inadvertently put their continued employment in jeopardy. And you actually have to communicate, earbash the chair in order to say, I would like to have this question on an agenda.
Yeah. My favourite topic of conversation. Right. All I'm going to say on this slide is declarations of interest, register of interests, annual declarations, website publications, auditors. Will absolutely essential that we do this. So how many of us are, as governance professionals, have still got governors and trustees that haven't completed their annual declarations form? It's now the beginning of November. I'm going to put my hand up because I've got several boards where people still haven't done it this year, and I've asked them 4 or 5 times by now. At what point does this become an issue? And we have to say, if you don't do that, you can no longer be attending any meetings. That takes bravery. So, but I just, get out there, keep pushing on this because it's really important. Now that budgets are being managed well and auditors are now looking at the other bits and bobs. It's come up 3 times from audits and trusts that I've been working with that there's a panic from the CFO going, we need the conflicts of interest, we need the register of interests updated PDQ because the auditors are looking, and they will check. And I've seen ambers on risk reports because a trustee hadn't declared a trusteeship in another organisation. So, the DFE have got a lot of information on related party transactions. There's huge amounts of information out there on what is a conflict of interest. So, shout it out. Matthew, you said something earlier about whose responsibility it was to call out the interest. So, as a trustee, I declare I've got an interest. It's up for the rest of the board to decide how they're going to mitigate that. It's not my decision because I've declared the interest. It's the rest of the board's responsibility to say that's a conflict or that isn't. You need to leave the room. You need to do this. We just aren't as good as we could be on mitigating some of this stuff. So I think in speeding things along a bit, I think that's all I need to say on that one, really.
So many people have got into trouble over the years for pressing for the quick decision, and they do it for the best of reasons, but the end doesn't justify the means when it comes to good governance. We said that we would take an hour of your time to share some of our thoughts. That is what we have done for you this evening. So by all means, disengage and let yourself go at this point. Fee and I are happy to stay around for a couple of minutes on the call if you've got something that you actually want to pick our brain over, if you've got a scenario that you want to raise. But other than that, thank you very much for attending. That is very much appreciated. Like I say, this was part of the Making a Difference series, which we are doing with the School Resource Management Network. When you get the slides, you will have mine and Fee's contact details. Both Fee and myself have got free resources on our website. Take a look at Fee's. The Great Big Governance Glossary is absolutely fabulous. If you want to have a look at something I've just posted, have a look at my Great Big Governance giveaway resources. When you go to my website, you'll find some stuff there, and I've blogged recently on how long it takes to master governance. Next SRMN webinar is next week. You can register via Eventbrite, and that is MAD Management, looking at change management and how people cope in a crisis. That is almost entirely Sharon Marsh speaking. I will be interviewing her, but not doing half of the speaking. Sharon will be speaking. We've got a webinar coming up on consultants, can't work with them, can't work without them. Also doing stuff around sustainability. And we'll be doing internal scrutiny, IT, and some other themes as well between now and March, maybe about one a month. just coming out on these. You'll meet different members, different firms from the network. So it won't always be me, it won't always be Fee. It'll be different people popping up and doing these, but there'll be a similar format. So do let us know what you thought of today's session. And if you want to get in touch with either Fee or myself directly, you are more than welcome. So thank you very much for attending. Enjoy whatever your Thursday evening has for you.
All feedback welcome.
All feedback welcome, and yeah, you'll get the notes that underpin the bullet points around how to ask difficult questions and how to exercise professional judgment are all in the slides, and you'll be able to share those internally and use them yourselves as long as Fee and I are attributed as the authors.